And welcome back to Getting to Know You. I am your host, Jen Dawson. I'm PeDRA's Associate Director of Education, and I am so excited to be kicking off Season 3 with an amazing guest. I have with me today the amazing Dr. Anna Bruckner. Dr. Bruckner is a professor of dermatology at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. She's the section head for pediatric dermatology at Children's Hospital of Colorado and the co-director of the epidermolysis bullosa clinic. She's a founding member of PeDRA and has just begun her term as PeDRA's president. Dr. Bruckner has served on several PeDRA committees, including chairing the membership committee, the studies committee, the genetic skin disease focused study group, and she has done immense work in growing the epidermolysis bullosa focused study group subgroup of the genetic skin disease group. So I am so excited. Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Bruckner. So why don't you tell me a little bit about how you got started in pediatric dermatology?
All right, sure thing. Well, thank you so much, Jen. It's really a pleasure to have this time to talk with you. I think that like many people who are in pediatric dermatology, I actually did not initially intend to become a pediatric dermatologist. When I was in medical school, I was very gung-ho on pediatrics and had really, focused on getting into pediatric residency. It was just sort of a last minute decision on my part to do a dermatology rotation at the end of my fourth year of medical school. And I was really taken, with I think quite a few things in dermatology. And that really kind of set some wheels in motion in terms of thinking about whether or not, pediatric dermatology could be a viable, career choice for me. I did end up going through the full 3 years of pediatric residency. Luckily, I was able to work with a great mentor, Dr. William Weston, during my pediatric training, and was able to stay at University of Colorado to do my dermatology training. And that really, I think solidified that pediatric dermatology was going to be the place for me. And after that, it was just the fellowship and working. And so it's been a it's been a little bit of a journey.
But everybody in pediatric dermatology seems to have had this roundabout pathway and has had like this one goal in mind and then been introduced to derm. And that experience, however small or big in dermatology, has just changed the course of their careers. So you're certainly not alone. And it is so fascinating to me that you're sort of all kind of in that boat together.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that, a common theme of pediatric dermatologists is that, they do really think of themselves, I think, as pediatricians first. And I think that, what you've described is not necessarily unusual because, exposure to dermatology in medical school is a little bit hit or miss, and there are many, many, many medical schools where there aren't even pediatric dermatologists on faculty. So, yeah.
So you're a pediatric dermatologist. You've started your career as an early investigator. So how did you come to research? Was research something that was always going to be a part of your path, or did that come later?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would have to say that in all honesty, I was somewhat ambivalent about research, as a student and as a trainee. I growing up, in high school, was actually very interested in the sciences, but kind of made this very deliberate turn to kind of focus on the liberal arts in college. And so I didn't really see myself, going into basic science research, although I found it very, very interesting. And so I did have some experiences, though, in terms of getting exposed to some clinical research throughout residency training. But in all honesty, I didn't necessarily feel prepared to be an investigator after I finished my fellowship and started, working as faculty. Generating new knowledge was definitely part of my job description. And so that was certainly a little bit intimidating. And so I tried to kind of do what I could, to kind of gather some skills through workshops and, talking with other people, getting mentors, but I think did come to a critical point, kind of in my transition from early to kind of mid-career, in that I really I think realized after trying to do some projects and finding that they were doable but very challenging, that I really could build up my skill set. And I was fortunate that when I moved from Stanford to the University of Colorado, I had an opportunity to participate or to take courses more or less through this Master's of Clinical Sciences program. And so I think that really kind of having the support, through that transition of being able to build those skills just gave me a lot more confidence, in terms of being able to move forward with my clinical research.
And it couldn't have been too much longer after that then that sort of PeDRA started happening, right?
Yeah, well, it was actually around the same time, so I moved to Colorado in 2011. And
Okay.
I think that, yeah, that kind of first, meeting to kind of get PeDRA going was in 2012. So, yeah, no, I mean, I think it was kind of a nice dovetailing, of
Mhm.
kind of growing interest in research, in pediatric dermatology as a way to advance the field, as well as me, investing in some of my own skills.
Yeah, yeah, kind of a reinforcement of that path that you had started
Hmm.
down now in research.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
talk to me a little bit about your areas of interest when it comes to
Hmm.
research. We know here at PeDRA, epidermolysis bullosa is a big
Hmm.
one. Can you talk about like what led you to EB?
So yes, EB I think has certainly been a passion, throughout the entirety of my career. I first got exposed to it in my dermatology residency. Just, in terms of seeing some of the patients, I had an opportunity to go and volunteer at Camp Discovery.
Mm.
And just so really seeing, the patients and how the condition, impacts so much of their lives was very, very moving to me. And so, I think that I felt really strongly that, I wanted to be involved with caring for patients with EB on some level, whether or not that was as a care provider and seeing how we could improve care. I mean, that was actually kind of, I think, my original sort of intention. But I was very fortunate that in my first faculty position at Stanford, that the department there had a very long history of trying to develop innovative therapies for EB. And really, was just very lucky to be able to work with Dr. Al Lane and the rest of the investigators there. And so that I think, really just reinforced to me that, even though our clinical care is really important, there is just so much unmet need for these patients that we need to be thinking about how we can not just improve that care, but really kind of find better treatments for these patients. And in some ways, we really are in a very kind of, interesting and fortuitous time in EB research, in that now, there are actually therapies that are being looked at by pharmaceutical companies, and I think that actually this next year is going to be very interesting, because there certainly can be, I think, the possibility of some treatments being approved by the FDA, and seeing how we can deliver those to patients, and study, the impact on their lives, I think is going to be really, really, really exciting.
Yeah, what's that got to be like for you? Because you've been working with these families for so many years, and as you said, there's just an insurmountable amount of unmet need with them. And now we have some things coming.
Hmm.
Are you excited? Is there a certain level of trepidation? Like, how does it feel to be
Yeah.
looking at these new therapies that are going to be coming to help these families?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I am definitely excited. I think that with, any new therapy that gets approved, there's unfortunately always a little bit of a learning curve in terms of how do we utilize it, and unfortunately, I think, it seems that with new therapies, because they're so expensive,
Mm.
there's a mountain of, bureaucratic paperwork and other things that you kind of need to wade through. And so, those things unfortunately don't make me very excited, but 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 I think that, from the standpoint of patients, there's definitely a lot of hope right now. And I think it is important, though, that we are going to be able to manage expectations, though, because these some of these newer therapies are really going to be focal, and aimed at really just treating wounds.
Mhm.
They are not going to address, all of the manifestations of EB, but I think that they're a great starting point. We really kind of need to make incremental improvements in the lives of these patients, and there is still going to be plenty of room for broadening, kind of the scope of these therapies, and looking at additional approaches. I think that, we are going to have kind of a complementary, way to kind of look at these different therapies for our patients.
Mhm. Where do you see PeDRA fitting into that equation?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think PeDRA can fit into that equation in many ways. First and foremost, we have great partnerships, with our patient advocacy groups. And so better understanding, kind of how these treatments are being used by patients, what impact they have on their lives, what obstacles maybe there are, for patients utilizing these treatments, can certainly be a way that PeDRA can partner with these advocacy organizations to learn more about that. In addition, we have such, a wealth of great clinicians and investigators. I think that, looking at the outcomes that these patients are experiencing over time, is really going to be a very ripe area. But also just, in terms of improving education and dissemination about these advances to the broader public is going to be really important as well.
I couldn't agree more. It is exciting to think about how PeDRA can play such an important role in this process as we get these new
Right.
treatments available. Really, I mean, for EB, but for so many other skin diseases that,
Exactly.
switching gears a little bit,
Hmm.
you have just been officially inaugurated as our president at this last PeDRA meeting in DC. So welcome, President Bruckner. um,
Well, thank you.
we've spent a lot of time talking, especially you and I, in various interviews in our 10-year celebration, our 10th anniversary celebration. We spent a lot of time talking about the future. But now that you're in the role, so to speak, what are your goals for PeDRA while you're in your presidency?
Yeah, I have to admit it does sort of seem a little bit surreal, to be to be in this role. You know, I think that PeDRA has, I mean, come such a long way, and its success has really just been, in a lot of ways, I mean, I think really just kind of mind blowing. So I think that first of all, is one of my goals. I don't want to screw anything up. No, I'm just kidding. um, but my point really is that I think that, PeDRA has put quite a lot of work into, developing its pillar goals. And I want to make sure that we certainly, stay on mission,
Mm-hmm.
to advance our work, and stay focused on that. But I do think that for me, a priority is really going to be maybe kind of developing, or further developing, I should say, this idea of maybe, paying it forward, especially in terms of our trainees and our younger people. I certainly want to make sure that we have a robust pipeline, of individuals who are coming into the field of pediatric dermatology and who are also interested in, in research and developing the skills that they need to help advance our field. And also for, our junior faculty, the early investigators and those people who are in the midway through their career. So to really make sure that they have, the skills, and the right experiences with PeDRA to be able to continue to be involved and develop people who can, step in to take over, as leaders within the organization and help the field of pediatric dermatology.
I completely agree. I think that's super exciting. There's
Sure.
so much energy in our young people right now, especially
Hmm.
our really early trainees. Even our medical students have just been flooding in and with great vigor wanting to participate on studies and help where they
Hmm.
can. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that evolves over the next few years as well. One thing I do want to go
Hmm.
back to, because
Sure.
you sort of,
Hmm.
we chuckled about it for a minute to see like just how far PeDRA has come in such a short amount of time. If you
Hmm.
were to look back over the last 10 years, what has surprised you the most about PeDRA?
In some ways, I mean, maybe this shouldn't be a surprise, and we kind of alluded to it, but I think that just the magnitude of the success of PeDRA, I mean, to me, it's very impressive. I mean, I was, involved in the original group of individuals, who met to kind of brainstorm and think about how we could create, a way to advance research in pediatric dermatology. And that was a group of maybe 20, 25 people. I mean, it was very small. And, I think it's very possible. Sometimes, people come together and they have great ideas, but there just isn't the momentum or the energy to really kind of carry them forward. And I think PeDRA has been a great success story in terms of just you see it in the numbers. We're growing every year. I think that in terms of members, the work that we're getting done and just the reach that we have, and just to really kind of see that exponential increase, I think it's just really, really exciting. Because that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. And I do think it is a little bit surprising. It's often right that we can come together as large groups of people and be excited about something, but it's harder to
Sure.
execute that
Yes.
plan, right? And then to sustain it and grow it. So it's been
Correct.
really exciting. So also touching on, you talked about, making sure that our trainees and early and mid-career folks are supported. And, that pipeline seems to be flowing into PeDRA so seamlessly. But what about traditional scientists or general dermatologists?
Mm-hmm.
How are their skills relevant to the work that we're doing? And what are some ways that we might be able to inspire them to become a part of this work we're doing?
I think that we can do that in several ways, but a couple that come to mind, are that uh, there's obviously so much that's common across all skin disease, not necessarily, pediatric versus adults. Many of the conditions that are common in dermatology start in children. So, there's obviously a lot of common ground there. And I think that, PeDRA can help to provide both context and relevance, for kind of understanding the impact of skin disease. As an example, a scientist could be working on a condition such as EB, but in many ways, I think that they can kind of be divorced, from understanding, the relevance of what they are studying in terms of how that could be translated into something that can be helpful to patients. And so, that collaboration between the scientific, and the kind of clinical translational side of things really does, I think, help to make the research that people are doing when they are, in a lab, I think more meaningful. You know what I mean? By kind of highlighting the kind of the relevance that's there. I think another way that, PeDRA can be useful to a broader community is really just through the skill building and education that we provide, because many of the things, especially that are coming out of the early investigator, forums and whatnot, skills that are kind of aimed at, your resilience, your presentation, your communication. I mean, these are things that really are not necessarily specific to pediatric dermatology, but I think they can be so useful to people across the spectrum, of their disciplines and their careers. And so, we're doing, I think, a great service by helping our membership. But I mean, as I said, that, these skills are not necessarily specific to pediatric dermatology, and they really do have a broader place within the fields of dermatology and just kind of scientific, communication and in general.
Mm-hmm. I really like how you put it, that sort of like in my mind, I'm sort of imagining PeDRA as this bridge from the lab to the clinic and all that research that happens in between, and how the clinical research that our folks are doing and how the lab research can really come and meet in the middle.
There does need to be a bridge, between the bedside to the bench,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not a one-way bridge. Let's put it that way,
Right.
because, obviously we
Absolutely.
can take observations or that we make about patients and collaborate with more basic science investigators into understanding things, and then again that can also kind of go the other way in terms of taking those advances and translating them into therapies, or again kind of how do we kind of make the work that's being done, kind of relevant to the
Mm-hmm.
patients that we're taking care of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we come to an end, is there anything that you would like to share about yourself, like a hidden talent or some sort of, you could share your like your hobbies, what do you like to do when you're not doing research or working in the clinic?
Uh-huh.
Tell us something about you.
All right, that was a surprise question.
That is a surprise. I've put you on the spot. My
Yeah, no.
apologies.
Um, well, I think that one thing that I have certainly learned over the years, is that it is important to have outside interests and other ways, to sort of replenish your well.
Mhm.
If you don't, it's going to, be very challenging to kind of sustain the energy that you bring to the work. For me, my family is really important. I'm married. I have two kids. It's really important for me to spend time with them. But I also like to stay active. I do Pilates a couple times per week, and I recently bought well, I've been really into cycling for a while, but I recently traded in my road bike for a gravel bike, which I'm actually quite excited about. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting in some bike rides and
Well, thank you so much for joining me on Getting to Know You, Dr. Bruckner. This has been a delight. I know all of us at PeDRA are so looking forward to your presidency and all of the skills that you bring to this organization that you helped found. We are just immensely grateful for all of your work and your continued work. So thank you so much, Dr. Bruckner.
well, thank you, Jen. It's really been a pleasure talking with you, and I look forward to the next 2 years and more with PeDRA.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to Dr. Bruckner and her incredible work with EB and all of her other research. We so appreciate what she's doing for not only our network, but the field of pediatric dermatology research as a whole. If you want to catch more of our Getting to Know You series, be sure to listen to us on our podcast channel, Getting to Know You. You can also check out more videos on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to follow us on our social media, which we're at PeDRA Research on Twitter and Instagram, and the Pediatric Dermatology Research Alliance on LinkedIn. Thanks so much for watching. Tune in next time.